Welcome back. Thursday, February 22nd, 2018. This is the Seth and Chris Show. I'm Seth Leibson here in Phoenix. My partner and buddy and co-host Chris Buskirk is in Washington, D.C. at the Conservative Political Action Conference, the annual gathering of the conservative movement. Chris, how are things there? How's the mood there?
I don't know. The mood, I think, is good.
Ebullient.
I was thinking ebullient, but I don't know. I don't want to overstate it. I don't want my reporting on the mood to be fake news, Seth.
Well, it's a funny thing when you're the more cynical than me.
But I have another guest for us.
Yes, please.
So Brandon is still riding along with us. Julie is here somewhere, out tracking down guests, and Liz Shield, an editor of PJ Media, has joined us, and she has a few thoughts on guns. Guns.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Liz, you haven't been on the show before. Maybe just tell people a little bit about your background.
So I am an editor of PJ Media. Every morning I write a morning briefing. It's called The Morning Briefing. And I kind of go through the news of the day from the day before, what's going to continue to be in the news cycle for the next day. And I do write occasionally about guns, and I am a gun enthusiast as well as other fun hobbies, I guess you could say.
Morning briefing. Seth and I like things like this because we know everything about it just from the title.
Yes, it's
you
brief.
get it in the morning, and it's brief.
And it's a
brief.
briefing.
And it's a briefing,
That's
right. It's like a place near our studio in Phoenix, minimally invasive spinal surgery. We know everything about that business just from looking at their sign.
That's
just right. Liz, when we talked, what was it, 3 or 4 weeks ago, you were at the SHOT Show in Las Vegas. You are somebody who knows more than a little bit about guns, about gun rights. Every time there is a mass shooting, we feel obliged to say the obvious, but we will do it. We'll stipulate it's a terrible tragedy, it's a crime, and we want to have less of them. However, it is not about guns.
Right.
How do you think about this, and why is it that the media immediately shifts gears from telling us not so long ago that the police only abuse their rights to use force, right? They kill black people, right? That's what the police do. If you listen to the left as circa any day before last Wednesday or last Tuesday, I guess it was.
Yeah.
But now they're the only ones who should have guns. How do you think about this?
I feel like there's a lot of cognitive dissonance on the subject of firearms as far as the left goes. And when I say the left, I include the media, because the media isn't giving you news and information. They are pushing an agenda on this. It's frustrating to see that we aren't going to have a good faith effort to discuss how to stop mass shootings. After the Florida shooting, we didn't even know what happened, and we were already getting the gun control. We have to ban guns, right? We did not even know what happened. We didn't know who did it. We didn't know how the guns were acquired. We don't know if it was legal, illegal, nothing. We knew nothing, and we already had the anti-gun agenda push. So, if you want to, as a gun owner and other people that are Second Amendment supporters, we're no less likely to be murdered by a maniac who shouldn't have a gun. So we all have an interest in stopping maniacs from acquiring firearms. The question is, where did the system break down? We're supposed to have a system that keeps bad people from getting firearms. Because there's really only two ways to handle this. Either we figure out a better way to keep maniacs from getting guns, or we just take guns away from everybody. There's really
Which is what
not...
the left wants.
That's right. That's it. They can say they want sensible gun reform, but that is not true. What they want is to take all the guns, because we aren't talking about how to actually stop it. In other words, the left doesn't come from this and come to this position, come to the table and say, how can we make sure everybody keeps their Second Amendment rights while also making sure we don't get guns in the wrong hands? That's not how they approach this. They're already making demands. So it's very frustrating, but I don't think we're going to have much of a good faith effort. And I don't think whatever changes are made, I don't think are going to satisfy the left for sure.
Well, and Chris, I don't know if you've been listening to the chants going on from the left, but we hear a lot. Why is it that our Second Amendment rights trump the right to life, coming from the left?
Oh, that's
that was one
fun.
of the
That's new.
It's real original, isn't it? Considering
That's
this
new.
is the party of unfettered abortion, with all due respect. And
well, to be fair, the march to life was covered just as much as all these rallies about the Florida shooting, right? Wasn't it?
Right.
Oh yeah, right. No, well, look, I will believe that the left is serious about this issue when they want to start talking about the 650,000 abortions that will happen in this country this year.
That's right. Well, and how about this? Whatever happened to just placing law enforcement or a person who is trained to use firearms at the front of the school to be on patrol? Well, we have that in airports. We have that in just about every part of life. It's a police state, but we won't do that in the school.
It's like they believe in magic. It's like if you bring a gun into a school, all of a sudden that's different than, let's say, a teacher who's at the grocery store and has a concealed permit and she's got it in her purse. Like, why are those two places totally different for the left?
And if I can just add one more thing, I was talking to Ned Ryan during the break, and he mentioned that there was a concealed carry class provided to teachers, and what they found was that it was overpacked after the first day.
In Ohio, that someone was offered free classes, and in Nevada, actually, where my home state, there is a place there that will offer their class is free, and to get your Nevada concealed permit, just to anybody who wants it. He is like the owner of that gun. It's called the gun store. Free. That I got my Nevada concealed permit there because. That's someone who's really dedicated to it. But again, people who are teachers also conceal in the grocery store. Maybe they're in the library. Maybe they're at Target. Why is it that when you bring a firearm into school that it's different?
Right.
Because the left has just demonized guns qua gun.
They're freezing the position.
That's what it is.
They're arguing against it.
Yep.
Saul Alinsky.
They don't seem to get the idea that there is a natural right to self-defense.
No, they don't believe in any sort of.
They don't believe in the Constitution.
Right.
They don't believe.
Right.
In
I mean, so there are two. Well, actually, I guess there are three elements. There's a natural right that people have to defend themselves, their life and their property. Mm-hmm. There's an obligation, I think, to help protect the innocent where you can, and then there's the right to defend against an overreaching government. Mm-hmm. Right? I think that's the part of it.
Well,
that
they don't
like
that at all.
They don't like that at all.
Right. It's been very interesting to watch. I don't know if you know how many gun owners, but every gun owner I've ever known. I grew up around guns in Fort Myers, Florida. They're some of the most responsible people I have ever known. In fact, Shoot Straight down in Fort Myers was where I used to go shooting as a kid. They required, before you were allowed to buy a gun from them, you had to go through safety classes. You had to go through and so this whole thing that we're not responsible enough to own guns. Well, the founders thought we were. It's the number 2 amendment.
Yeah. For a reason, right after the first one, for free speech,
to protect the free speech. Right.
It's interesting, there have been several mass shootings at churches in this country over the last, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years or so. A lot of churches now have done the responsible thing, which is they have gotten people trained in their congregations, so that in the hopefully unlikely event that a mass shooter shows up during a service, there are people who are trained not only to shoot, but also to address that particular fact set. A mass shooter in a single room with a lot of people.
It doesn't matter what...
Schools can do the same thing. It is something that is trainable.
Well, absolutely. And it doesn't... And they've demonized the AR-15 as a dreaded AR-15.
The assault weapon,
but
which is not.
Assault weapon, right. The fully automatic. Sometimes they do say it's a fully automatic machine gun. But if you are in a room of unarmed people, it doesn't really... It's not about firepower anymore. They're unarmed, and you have a gun, and that's it. So
they demonized the AR-15. You realize that in the last church shooting in Texas, the man who
stopped him.
He stopped him with an AR-15.
They don't get in. They don't follow the story, right? It cuts off for them. It's just the church shooting. And no, the left isn't particularly sad about the churchgoers. It's not their cohort.
Right.
I think if you, but. Again, like in that case, a lot of churches have come out publicly and said we are arming. We're going to have our congregants armed. We're going to have security. Guess what? That church gets crossed off the list of the person who wants to make a statement because they're not going to be able to have free reign. So the mere fact of saying we are going to have armed security and we take this seriously is a deterrent in itself.
And can I just add also...
You don't think the sign on the front door that says gun-free zone, you don't think that's a deterrent to the mass shooter?
It's called fish in a barrel.
Right.
Get your fish in a barrel here.
Well, and also, real quick, the argument of, well, it's a mental health thing. Am I the only one who's a little worried that Congress is going to start making it easier to commit someone who's suspected of being a little odd?
Mitch
McConnell and Nancy Pelosi are suddenly going to be the determinants of that one?
That is very concerning. I mean, we are kind of at a dangerous time as far as civil liberties go because we're going to move into the, do you want the government deciding who is sane or insane?
Right.
And So that's a problem. But at the same time, we had such a failure in our system.
But it was and with all due respect, it was a law enforcement failure. They
it
knew
absolutely
about this guy.
was. The biggest problem we have on the gun front is that the gun laws aren't enforced. The ones that we have, there's almost 300 different gun laws at the federal level. Why aren't they enforced? Why aren't straw purchasers
just like
punished?
immigration
Obama
laws.
didn't do anything for 8 years on that front.
Chris, can I have that hold just right there and pick it up right on the other side as we're heading to a break?
Okay.
You got it. Great. Thank you very much. I'm Seth Leibson. He's Chris Buskirk, live from Washington, D.C. CPAC conference. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Seth and Chris Show. I'm Seth Leibson. He is Chris Buskirk. I'm in Phoenix. Chris is in Washington, D.C., live from the Conservative Political Action Conference with great folks up there. Chris, who you got with you?
I've got Julie Kelly and
Kassy
Dillon.
Kassy is the founder of Lone Conservative, so she has a big group of lonely conservative college kids, and she was great. She organized a whole group out here and raised money to send them here and pay for their tickets and hopefully some room and board and I think some pizza. And so we're going to talk to her a little bit about my heart just goes out to these young kids here because I can't imagine the campus environment that you guys are operating in right now. And so why don't you talk a little bit about your group and the kids young adults that you brought here for the week.
Yeah, so 2 years ago, I founded an organization called Lone Conservative. It's basically an organization created to give young conservatives a way to get involved in the movement through writing. So we have about 200 contributors from 38 states and 6 countries. So it's really exciting. Think of it as the National Review of college students. So it's mostly op-eds.
Or American greatness.
Yeah. Yeah, so we do a lot of op-eds, some reporting. And mostly you'll hear about crazy things we've had with our professors, crazy encounters, maybe there's weird clubs at school we'll talk about, and then we'll talk about just, different ideas coming from the young conservatives. Because you do see a difference in the beliefs that young conservatives have than the older generation. I think being at CPAC, you can definitely see that.
What do you think some of those are?
Well, I would say LGBT issues. A lot of young conservatives identify as conservatarians. They're very libertarian on a lot of different issues. They don't really care what's happening in social issues as much. Obviously, pro-life. We're the pro-life generation. But when it comes to fiscal policy, that's what's most important to us because we're worried about going out after college and finding a job.
How does that play into the way you think about immigration?
Yeah, so immigration, I'd say, is another issue right there. Especially a lot of college Republicans down in California and Texas, they're really talking about these issues. Personally, I'm from Massachusetts, so immigration doesn't affect me as much as it does people down there. So it's definitely not one of my areas of expertise.
So where did you found your group?
So I go to a school in Massachusetts called Mount Holyoke. It's an all-girls school. It's the first one in the country. And so we named it Lone Conservative because I was because we have some freshmen that are conservative. I was actually the only conservative on campus, and I dealt with a lot of hatred from professors and from students. And so, Lone Conservative. And yes, it's kind of funny how we have 200 contributors, but it's Lone Conservative. We do that because most of us do go to liberal schools, and there's little to no conservative clubs or even just students in general on campus.
What would you say, my daughter's going away to college next year. What would you say, and I'm a little nervous about where she's probably going to be going to a Big Ten school. I'm a little nervous about it. She's very outspoken conservative. So are you reaching out to college or high school seniors and kind of guiding them what to expect when they go to these schools and how to defend themselves? And what kind of advice are you giving incoming college students?
So we just started taking high school students. So we have different groups chats where we all talk to each other. We have a few high schoolers now. We have about 5. It's really awesome to have that because when I was in high school, I didn't really care that much. I didn't know what my political ideology was. I was pro-choice in high school. I had no idea about the pro-life movement, any of that. I grew up in a very liberal state, obviously, in a very liberal house. So definitely we are taking high school students, which is really exciting. But the advice I always give to high school students is, 1, debate your professors. Some people like Ben Shapiro and me break on this. He says, go to college, pretend you're Bernie Sanders, get good grades, then go out and fight them. I am against that. I make friendships with my professors. Obviously, there's a few that it was really hard to get them to accept my beliefs. But once you get to know them, you go see them in the office hours, definitely, argue conservative. But the problem is when you do that, you're going to have to work harder than your liberal peers. Because a lot of times professors want you, if you're writing a paper, they want you to use just the sources they're giving. So, they're very liberal bent. So you have to actually work a lot harder. So definitely do that. Make friends, get involved in activism, and then this one's unrelated, but study abroad. I always tell conservatives that, because when you go abroad as a conservative, you're really seeing different countries. I went to Israel.
You go to Israel.
I went to Israel, yeah, and I loved it. It was great being in a more conservative country. Everyone there, you don't have this pronoun craziness stuff going on. It was very nice.
It sounds like you did not grow up in a conservative house.
Yeah.
Am I right?
No, not at all. I grew up in a single mother house, and I was not politically engaged at all. However, my grandfather was the one that would take me, we'd go for drives, and he'd talk to me about all the things he was believing in and really getting me into politics.
And was he a conservative?
Yes.
Or is he, I guess
me and him used to fight with each other during the primary because I worked for Carly Fiorina, and he was a Trump guy since day one. And he'd call me, he's like, you're on the wrong campaign. What are you doing? And I was like, no, I'm on the right campaign. Like, Carly's going to get it. Obviously, that didn't happen. But yeah, so Grandpa is definitely the person I talked to a lot.
Was he the man who influenced you? Was he the one who kind of led you to the path of righteousness?
Well, he was the one that got me thinking conservatively, and then I had AP Gov, and we would debate it a little bit more. And then I got to college. I was not planning on doing everything I'm doing. I wanted to, major in history, go to law school, go that route. However, on my campus, there's another girl who's really engaged in politics, and the students found out about it, and they started, protesting her. They put notes on her door telling her to leave the school. You're not welcome here. And so she ended up leaving and running
Coexist.
Exactly. She ended up leaving, and she ran for state senate in New Hampshire, and she's the youngest one in the country right now, I believe, or state rep of New Hampshire. Her name's Yvonne Dean Bailey. So when she left, I was quiet for a semester, and I ended up taking up the torch and started speaking out, and it was great. But during the election, I'd say things got a little bit heated. They're simmering down right now, but I'm about to graduate, so I need to go out with a bang. So I gotta step it up.
So what happens then? So you graduate. What's your plan?
That is the question, the hardest question in the world.
I don't think you'll have a hard time getting a job.
Well, I'm going to take a year off.
Good.
And I want to go to grad school. I'm looking at Tufts and I'm looking at Harvard. I want to do international relations. Believe it or not, American politics is not what I like doing. I like doing more of the Middle Eastern stuff.
Oh, interesting. And so do you have a team behind you at Lone Conservative?
Yeah, we have a really big team. We have people running social media. We have photographers who are taking pictures of us right now.
I thought that was just the paparazzi following you around.
Yeah, and then we have an editor-in-chief. We have a big editing group. So there's so many different ways for people to get involved. So it's not just an outlet, it's also a community. So I teach them how to write. I teach them how to go to conferences. Obviously, a bunch of us are here, and I help them get into the movement. We do trainings on branding. I let them know, hey, this is how you should have your online presence, because that's the problem my generation has. They say crazy things on the internet and don't realize that it's going to follow you.
Forever.
Everything.
Twitter never forgets.
Doesn't it go to the Library of Congress, all your tweets?
Yeah.
So you have to be careful what you say. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, easier than that, you can just go to Twitchy. They have it all.
I love Twitchy. They're my favorite.
So how many schools are represented? I know you said this, but what is it?
So
what's the number?
we have about 200 students. I'd say we have about maybe 150 schools represented.
And how do you reach out how do they find you?
They find me on Twitter.
No kidding.
Yeah, that's how we do our recruiting.
A lot. It's great.
It's my favorite place.
Yes.
Kassy Dillon from Lone Conservative. What's the website? Is it loneconservative.com?
Loneconservative.com. And you can follow us on Twitter at LOConservative and Instagram at Lone Conservative.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Chris Buskirk. He's Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Seth and Chris Show. I'm Seth Leibson in Phoenix. Chris Buskirk is in Washington, D.C., live with the Conservative Political Action Conference, the annual conference of conservative thinkers and writers in Washington, D.C. Chris, how's it going? What you got there?
It's good. It's starting to clear out a little bit here. I've got Brandon Weichert, though.
I think I cleared the place out.
Yeah, Brandon comes, the people go. I'm not saying there's a causal relationship, but at least that we have correlation. But no, it's good. I've got Julie Kelly here on my left, Brandon across from me, and I thought that was a real interesting interview we just had with Kassy.
A question I wanted to pose to all three of you. You've seen certainly clips of, read stories about, if not watched, the show, the town hall on CNN with Marco Rubio and Dana Loesch. Do you think there's any percentage in someone like Marco Rubio even going to a forum like that? I know it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't. Other people had turned it down. CNN is not going to host a fair town hall on this issue. They have been on a crusade from an angle on this. And I just wonder if you're Marco Rubio or his staff, if you think it's a good idea to say yes to it or no. I'm all in favor of going to groups that disagree with you, but I'm not in favor of going to riots, quite frankly.
Yeah, it's interesting, Seth. You and I have talked about this.
You bet.
Quite a lot.
You bet.
There is 0%. Well, no, actually, there's a 100% in Marco Rubio going to an event like that. He's going to lose.
Right.
Every single time.
But isn't that what Conservative Inc.'s all about?
It's more about him and about a lot of the people who go to these events. Right, the deck is stacked against you.
He looked bad. Not his fault, but he looked bad.
Actually, I think it is his fault.
Okay.
He's just not good at this, and
Okay.
he doesn't know it. Right?
Okay.
Self-knowledge is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
He should have some. There are a handful of people who can go into forums like that and come out looking pretty good. A handful. Everybody else needs to stay away.
Yep. So true. I actually worked a little bit with Marco Rubio on Capitol Hill, his staff rather, and it did not surprise me at all when I saw him pop up there, because I know exactly what the media team over there does, and they're Conservative Inc. That's what we call it over at American Greatness, and it's all about proudly running into a losing battle while not really fighting very well for what you believe in, and that's, to me, seems like what he did.
But what's the alternative?
Seth, are you still there?
Yeah, we're here. I'm digesting what you and Brandon were saying, and
sorry,
what,
it sounded like we were disconnected.
no problem. And what
Sure
Julie, it sounds like Julie was
Julie.
about to chime in. Yeah, go ahead,
But
Julie.
what's the alternative? I mean, now we know that CNN harasses people. I mean, they just did it to Ted Cruz for refusing to go on their program. I mean, they would have attacked Rubio anyway. He is the senator from that state.
Right.
It is. Everybody knows on our side anyway. It's a setup. And so I'm not really sure what his alternative would have been, except always when you're going to do that, you need to be really prepared with some strong
I just think that most of these people aren't capable of it. Marco Rubio, remember the Marco
agree.
bot? Remember his meltdown during the debates?
He did the same thing last night, by the way. Did you notice
Yeah.
he used that same talking point over and over again?
Right. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, he's a bit of a trained parrot, right? Somebody is programming him with just a couple of lines before he goes in front of a camera, and so he's good for a 30-second soundbite. If he gets pushed, you find out.
That's as far as it goes. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I'd say he's a mile wide and an inch deep. He's just not a mile wide.
Well, the sad thing is, I remember him in Florida from 2006 to 2010. I remember the conservative Marco of the Florida House. And what we got after he won Senate, within a year and a half, he changed. And so,
Brandon, you're so right about. I'm glad you said that. You know, one of the great extemporaneous speeches that didn't get enough press or coverage of, my watching political rhetoric for some 40-plus years was his farewell address to the House of Florida. You can still get it on YouTube. It's one of the great extemporaneous speeches of all time. It really is. I've never seen it repeated.
I lived in Florida. I worked for a lot of the same people that when I was, from 16 till 24 or 25, I worked on campaigns, mostly in Florida. So I was very familiar with him, and it just completely changed.
That's what ambition does to politicians.
Yes.
We're going to go to a quick break. We'll be right back. I want to pursue this a little further. What can conservatives do to get their message out on this?
Fight.
If it's not going to CNN, and I don't think we should, quite frankly. I mean, I'm not opposed to an interview, but that was a riot. I am Seth. He is Chris. We're here with Brandon Weichert and Julie Kelly in Washington. We're not here. I'm here. They're in D.C. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Seth and Chris Show. I'm Seth Leibson. Chris Buskirk is in Washington, D.C. at the CPAC conference with Brandon Weichert and Julie Kelly.
I was trying to do our intro, but
go ahead.
When I can't see you, I don't know that you're going to do it.
Take the stab. Do it. Two intros are better than one.
Oh, you're right. I am Chris Buskirk. He's Seth Leibson. I'm broadcasting live from CPAC, the annual convention here just outside Washington, D.C. How's that?
Yeah, I mean, if one is good, two is better.
Right.
Yeah.
So we just go around the table?
Yes, right. It's a medley of our greatest hit.
We're the three amigos of CPAC is what I'm thinking here.
Great. No, Brandon, Julie, Chris, one of the things we were talking about right before the break is how look, I said conservatives get their message out on this issue, particularly the Second Amendment. It should not be. It's not a conservative issue. I erred in saying how conservatives, how constitutionalists, how people who care about the Constitution, how originalists, how the founders. How do we get our message out on this when we are faced with this rising tide of spokesmen and hecklers, frankly, hecklers with a heckler's veto on this issue. Dennis Prager was on earlier, said, you listen to those kids last night. It's clear they've never actually in their life heard a defense of the Second Amendment. It's kind of silly that even think in our day and age you need to defend a constitutional amendment, but here we are.
Well, Twitter is always a great venue. The president has shown that you can completely, for very cheap, circumvent all of the mainstream media as long as you have a lot of followers.
Yeah, I mean, the history is the undiscovered country, right? People they're not being educated, and so they hear these memes or these narratives or just outright lies being foisted upon them on Instagram or on BuzzFeed or maybe in their classroom. And
definitely in their classroom.
And they just don't know any better. And that's a failure. Dennis Prager was on in the last hour, saying that the greatest generation has failed the country. The so-called greatest generation, or not the greatest generation, but their kids, the baby boomers, have failed the country. They've destroyed the educational system they have. And the people who are in school now or were recently in school just don't know a lot about this country. Seth, you always say it. You can't love what you don't know. Mm-hmm. We haven't really done a good job teaching people to know this country, because if they did, they'd love it a whole lot more. And that's why shows like this are popular. Because people find out as they get later in life, wow, look at all the things I missed. The heroic narrative that is America, or as you like to say, the second greatest story ever told.
Yeah, I mean, and, you think about it now. We're amassing a list here of constitutional provisions that need reinstruction, a great relearning, and a great reteaching. Dennis Prager's coming here with Adam Carolla to do the First Amendment. We are now going through a great relearning and a great reteaching on the Second Amendment. You and I have known for a long time and said for a long time, Chris, that the Fourth and Fifth Amendment, from which we draw innocence until proven guilt, is almost a lie in our era. You look at what the FBI has been up to, particularly Peter Strzok. I shouldn't say the FBI. I should say rogue elements at the FBI. You wonder if there's
the leadership?
The leadership.
Well, yeah, you wonder if there's a Fourth Amendment anymore. I mean, just as we go down this list, we're amassing a rather large list of constitutional provisions that it seems to me half the country just doesn't believe in anymore.
Or care about.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the part that's worrying to me, is that I'm a millennial, and I came up in the education system not long ago, and even looking at people who are younger than me, listening to their experiences and what they think, it's pretty scary how warped the culture has become. And, at some point, there's going to be not enough people around who remember the truth with a capital T. And so I don't know, how do we preserve that? I don't really know.
Well, this is kind of
the truth, not my truth.
Right.
Yeah, my truth. This is a little bit of the discussion we had yesterday about policies. So who was it? Ed Morrissey brought up, there's not enough discussion about a balanced budget or entitlement reform, but you can only pick so many battles at a time. And if you ask people, what's more important, little tweaks maybe to Social Security or Medicare, or taking this fight head on, what's happening in our public schools and academia, in the culture, and fighting back, because they do want all of the values that have made this country great and make our families great and communities great. They want to destroy those.
That's right.
So you can talk about a balanced budget. That sounds great. But what good is that if the country is not recognizable?
This is exactly the point. I had lunch today with a colleague. So this is somebody who, not particularly political, somebody in business, been very successful in his own business, and is getting more involved politically. And he said this exact point. He said, one of the things we like about Donald Trump and about his agenda is he's interested in taking back the heart and soul of the country. The money, it's important, yes, but we have to deal with the first things first. We have to deal with the culture. We have to deal with the values, and then we can deal with how we pay for it later.
And I just had a piece published at the American Spectator, and as I write a retinue of pieces for the primary publication, American Greatness, which is the leading publication in conservative circles. But I did have one piece published, and it was all about what I was responding to. They keep blaming toxic masculinity for the shooting, and I said, no, it's toxic liberalism. It's toxic liberalism that has warped our young men. We don't really teach our young men, our boys, how to be men, responsibility, the instincts that used to be considered masculine back in another time. We don't really teach them that. We tell them to, do whatever, so long as it's not toxic masculinity. And this young man in question was an evil person, but he was also exacerbated those negative trends with having no positive male role model in his life. And the only thing he could look to probably was society. And what does society value from men? You have the rap culture, you've got all of the toxic liberalism. Harvey Weinstein was once considered a great philanthropist. We now know he's a legendary philanderer. It's the people that we're told to look up to by pop culture and the media, particularly men, are not necessarily the most reputable people you would want to have in your room with you, let alone...
You wouldn't. I mean,
right.
Harvey Weinstein, you wouldn't. But we also see how that slippery slope, because then you have accusations made. I mean, we saw this with the Rob Porter case. Now, there's a very good chance that he's guilty of what he's been accused of. But the idea that hearsay and that the media, and you can't say anything because now I'll get accused of defending a wife beater.
Right.
But this whole, what you're talking about, Fourth and Fifth Amendment, I mean, there's no burden of proof anymore. Right. And that is also part of destroying the patriarchy. This is aimed at white men, removing them from power by whatever means, so they can impose more diversity and gender rights and identity politics.
It is the oppressor-oppressed Marxist ideology. Run amok.
That's what I meant. That's what I meant. Right.
Yes.
Nicely put, guys. You going to stick around a little longer with us?
I'm here until the room clears.
Okay,
There's
great.
only one person left.
Seth, Chris, Julie,
Yes.
Brandon, we'll be right back. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Seth and Chris Show. I'm Seth. He is Chris. Is that okay that I did that, Chris?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Great. We could have a Monkey's Day, too.
Every time I go out of town, my house explodes.
Her house is exploding.
Yes, I was.
We have exploding houses.
That,
sorry.
Yes. And no, that's okay. Everyone in Phoenix wants to help, Julie.
Thank God I didn't swear.
That's good. That is good.
We're having our own little party over here, and I didn't realize you were on the air.
That's quite all right. Always assume you're live, just like Republicans going to CNN should remember the 3 A's. Always
Seth,
assume assault. Always assume assault, right?
I heard that Dana Loesch actually said that if she didn't have her armed guards with her, that she would have been physically assaulted.
That's what she said, yeah.
Dana Loesch. I never say her last name right. Loesch. Loesch. Wow, we got three different ones, but the person that I'm talking about, yes.
We know, right.
I thought that was wild. That CNN is now becoming openly hostile territory.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's interesting. This is the group of people, the hostile people who put her in fear of her physical safety.
Right.
Are the same.
Me too. Hashtag.
Right. Right. This is the same cohort that puts Heather McDonald in fear of her safety, which is the same cohort which injured a professor and puts Charles Murray in fear of his safety.
That's right.
Puts Ben Shapiro in fear of his safety. In other words, if you're a conservative on a campus and your safety is threatened, it's going to be from this age cohort, which, oddly enough, and ironically enough, I do not understand this, needs to be coddled with grievance circles and teddy bears when they are offended.
Don't forget puppies and hot chocolate.
Right? And marshmallows, right? I mean,
that's right.
This group, which is all too happy to perpetrate violence, can't handle a news story like an election without requiring social bubble wrap.
It's like a 2 or 3-year-old, right? If they hear something they don't like, they become violent.
But they've been infantilized. I mean, this is a cultural problem. Again, it isn't just a left-right thing. I think it's toxic liberalism. This has been like my theme all week. It's toxic. It just erodes everything.
How long have conservatives, social political conservatives, been mocking the the sports culture with youth sports that says everybody's a winner, everybody gets a participation trophy. Well, this is how that comes home to roost. Nobody ever lost a baseball game. Everybody got the trophy, and now they get to 20 years old, 25 years old, and they become violent when they hear an opinion that they don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go to a break. You guys will stick around a little bit longer?
I'm still waiting for the room to be cleared.
Excellent. Walk around a little bit more, Brandon, and you may just accomplish it. Julie attracts, you repel. That's good. One foot on the brake, one on the accelerator. I love it. Buskirk moderating the whole time. I'm Seth. He's Chris, Brandon Weichert, and Julie Kelly from American Greatness with us in Washington, D.C. We'll be right back.